Hello, welcome to your next memory lesson. Today we're going to be following on from the working memory model lesson and looking at some evaluation. So as a quick recap, the working memory model is a more accurate description of the short-term memory store taken from the multi-store memory model. So the working memory model believed that the multi-store memory model hadn't explained short-term memory in as much detail as was necessary. So according to this model, short-term memory is an active store which is used to hold information which is being manipulated. And Lodgy referred to it as the desktop of the brain. And what that meant is that it basically holds material in our conscious mind long enough for us to manipulate it, and we use it to make a decision or execute a task. So I'm going to give you an everyday incident, every day before lockdown happened, and I just want you to answer the questions just to refresh our memories about the working memory model. So pretend that it's the beginning of January and you are able to go sale shopping. You walk into a shop and you head straight for the bargain rail. You sort through it and you see a pair of trousers and a jumper that you really like. So you look at them, and while you're looking at them, you're making various mental calculations. So you're thinking, can you afford either or both of them? And then you think about how much money is in your bank account or how much cash you have, when you'll get next paid. So if you're going to run short on money after buying these purchases, then you'll think, oh, it's okay actually because it's payday in 3 days, etc. So all of these things go through your head. You also picture what the clothes will look like when you wear them and how easily they will clean or crease. So if it's hand wash only or dry clean only, you might think, nah, not for me. You might also consider what other clothes you've got to wear them with, how often you'll wear them. So you think, is it worth this price if I'm only going to wear it like once or twice? And there's probably lots of other things you'll consider as well. All of the decisions made before you actually come to a decision to try on, buy, come back later, ask for a second opinion, or not to buy the clothes at all. This is a simple example, but it serves to illustrate how many things go through our mind when making an everyday decision. So consider this example, and I want you to consider these questions. From the account provided, give 2 examples of tasks being carried out by this visuospatial sketchpad. And then within the scenario, suggest one more task that's not mentioned in the script that the visuospatial sketchpad could be doing. What else do you think we could be doing that's not mentioned in the scenario? From the account provided, give 2 examples of tasks being carried out by the phonological loop. And again, things that aren't mentioned in the script, what else could our phonological loop be doing? So there's lots and lots of things you can say. Pause me now and have a go at doing this. Question 1 asked you to provide 2 examples from the scenario. So you could have said lots of things. For example, seeing the trousers and the jumper would have used your visuospatial sketchpad. Imagining, picturing what they would look like on, what they might look like with other clothes, what they might look like dirty or creased. So you would have used both probably mainly your visual cache, which deals with form and colour, rather than your inner scribe, which deals with spatial information. Some things that weren't mentioned in the scenario, basically you could have said anything that involves other visual images. So anything that uses your inner eye, such as where you might wear them. So you might have pictured your school, your college, pub, your partner's reaction, your friend's reaction when they see you wearing them. So you might have pictured your mum's sad face if you picked a dress that's a little bit inappropriate. 3, from the account provided, give 2 tasks being carried out by the phonological loop. So anything that you are thinking about, even if it's not said out loud, is using your phonological loop. So saying in your head how much money is in the bank, when you would wear the outfits, where you would wear them, when you next get some money. That's all using your phonological loop. It's entering and it's going into your articulatory control process, and it's going round like a little Ferris wheel. And if other information comes into your phonological loop, then you're putting that information from the Ferris wheel into your phonological store. So yeah, anything that you think about or read, for example, your bank statement. And something that wasn't mentioned in the scenario, so basically anything else that involves the inner voice. So thinking about how long it may take to pay the outfits, if bought on a credit card, what your mum might say about you spending the money, how your friends might react when they see the outfits. You might have thought about the conversation that you were going to have with the cashier, etc. So we're going to go through the evaluation now. What we're going to do is look at 4 evaluation points. They're not written in Peel format, but as I saw from your multi-store memory model evaluation, where I asked you to fill in the Peel form, you are getting really good at Peels. Just a little bit more work needed on the explanation aspect of the Peels, but we can look at that as we go along. So the first is a strength of the working memory model, and it comes from dual task performance. Dual task performance is anything where you have to use more than one process of the working memory model at once. For example, a task that asks you to use your phonological loop and your central executive at once. So the main reason for developing the working memory model was actually to account for dual task performance differences. So why is it that we're not able to perform tasks as well when they use more than one aspect of the working memory model? So when we're asked to look at visual information and sound information at once. So what Baddeley and Hitch did to study the central executive is all participants had to complete task 1, and task 1 was a central executive task. So what participants had to do is they were shown some statements. So for example, B is followed by A, and then they would be shown 2 letters like A, B or B, A, and then they just had to say whether it was true or false. So B is followed by A, then shown A, B. Is that true or false? That in that case, that would be true, because B is followed by A in A and B, if that made any sense. And then participants had to do a second task. So they were either asked to do a phonological loop task, which was saying the repeatedly, or they were asked to do a joint central executive and phonological loop task. So they had to say random digits. So one only used the phonological loop because you don't really need the central executive just to repeat a sound. But when we're saying random digits, we do need the central executive because the information would go into our central executive, and then the central executive would decide whether to send it to the visual spatial sketchpad, the episodic buffer, or the phonological loop. And what they found is that task 1, so seeing these statements and then deciding whether they were true or false, was much slower when task 2 involved the central executive and the phonological loop. So if they had to perform task 1 whilst saying they performed it much faster than if they had to do task 1 while also saying random digits. And this supports the idea that the central executive is part of working memory. So if you were going to write this as a Peel, you would put a strength of the working memory model is that there is evidence from dual task performance studies. You would explain Baddeley and Hitch's study, and then as your explanation, you would say, therefore, the working memory model does have explanatory power or does explain working memory well, as it supported the idea that central executive is part of working memory. Another strength comes from brain damaged patients. So lots of our evidence for memory does come from brain damaged patients. So this is one that we've looked at before KF, we spoke about him last lesson, he forgot short-term auditory information much more than visual information. So he didn't really have any issues remembering visual information in his short-term memory, but he had a lot of problems remembering acoustic information. The auditory problems were limited to verbal materials such as numbers and letters, but not meaningful sounds like a phone ringing. So he would react to a phone ringing, but he wouldn't be able to remember letters and numbers. There's another patient, SC, who had good learning abilities, but when things were read out loud, they couldn't learn the word pairs, which suggested damage to the phonological loop. And it shows that it goes beyond just a basic short-term memory store, because it was specific problems with learning words that were read out loud, because they were able to learn words if they read it. And then LH was involved in a road accident, and they were better at spatial tasks than those involving imagery, suggesting these separate stores in the visual spatial sketchpad. So spatial tasks, remember, that's all to do with our inner scribe, and those involving imagery such as form and colour, those are dealt with in our visual cache. So this is further research support for the working memory model, because it's showing that short-term memory does have separate stores, and it's proof of the phonological loop and the visuospatial sketchpad. A limitation, however, of these case studies is that they're not an ideal way of gaining evidence for a working memory model. Brain trauma often leads to affecting the person's behaviour, which means that despite their memory problems, they may just perform worse on certain tasks due to this brain damage. Also, they might have other difficulties like paying attention, which means they underperform on certain tasks. So the fact that they say, oh, KF had issues remembering acoustic information, that might not be due to the fact that his phonological loop was damaged. It might be other problems such as attention tasks or other brain damage that has led to his inability to remember acoustic information. Therefore, this is a limitation of the working memory model, because we don't know if something else is causing this memory impairment. Therefore, it limits the explanation of the working memory model. The last limitation that we're going to look at is the fact that the central executive is a little bit hard to describe, and it is a bit of a vague concept. So what is the central executive really? What do we know about it? We know that it's the first process in our working memory model. So everything goes into our central executive, and we know that it directs information to the other slave systems. It allocates resources, but is this not essentially the same as attention that we saw in the multi-store memory model? It's vague and it doesn't really explain much. And critics point out that maybe there are several central executives. What makes Badley and Hitch think that there's only one central executive that's modality free, that can deal with all sorts of information? Maybe there's more than one central executive, one that deals with visual information, one that deals with semantic, one that deals with acoustic, etc. So Eslinger and Damasio studied EVR, who was another patient, and they had a cerebral tumour removed. He performed well on reasoning tasks, suggesting that his central executive was intact. However, he had very poor decision-making skills, suggesting that there was some sort of damage within his central executive. Therefore, the account of the central executive is unsatisfactory, as it doesn't explain anything and is likely to be more complex than how it is currently viewed, because reasoning tasks and decision-making skills are both tasks that the central executive must be able to do. So if a patient, EVR, can do one but not the other, this suggests that the central executive is probably more complex than how the model portrays it to be. So that's another limitation. And the last evaluation point is a strength, and it's evidence for the phonological loop and the articulatory process. So there are 2 worksheets for you to complete. Both of them tell you about some research into these, so they are both research support. And there's some questions at the bottom just to really get you thinking about the evaluation. So I want you to have a go at these, and I will post the answers in the next memory lesson, which will be next week. So as always, any questions, let me know if you need any help, and please post your notes onto Teams when you are finished. See you soon.